very warm welcome to all of you who are joining us this afternoon for this handbell tutorial session. And I think you're making part of OGEHR history by joining us and participating, which I think this is a very exciting inaugural event. My name is Margaret Merkley, and I am going to be one of the two moderators for this session. I am chair of the program committee and also president of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers.
So I am Manny. I am your co-moderator for these OGEHR handbell tutorial sessions. You may know me as the coordinator of the OGEHR email tree, which you likely receive on a regular basis. And I am also a member of the OGEHR Communications Committee. And I'm very happy to be here with you all today.
Today, our clinician and tutorial host is Rob Cairns, and he's put together a series of 3 tutorials, and they are all together called Practicing Handbells at Home Without Handbells. And as all of you know by now, he is focused in on a weaving tutorial today.
So Rob is a music and drama teacher at Lester B. Pearson School for the Arts in London, Ontario. And he is also the director of Jubilate Bells at the Metropolitan United Church. And if he wasn't busy enough, he is also the current vice president of OGEHR. So thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you.
So at this point, we will be inviting you to ask questions on the text chat, and we will be going through those questions and directing to Rob. And actually, we already have our very first question. Marg, did you?
Okay, I have one. It's on here from Mary, Laurie, to everybody. And Rob, the question is, say you have C4, C sharp 4, D, and D sharp. If C is the usual left hand bell and D is the right hand bell, has the D been put down and replaced by the C sharp before you began the chromatic ascent?
I think it really depends on the music itself, what you're required to do. If you're ringing, if you just rang your D and then you rang your C, you're going to have to put it down quickly before you pick up your C sharp. But it's all a matter of planning with your weaving. And that's why I created that whole series of exercises. At the very end of the video, I said, please check out the exercises on the web page below. Those are on my personal web page, but on the OGEHR web page, there is a link so that if you click that, it takes you to a whole series of exercises, and the music is right on the web page. And as well, there's a sound file below each of the little lines of music, and if you click on that, you'll be able to hear what that music is doing. And because you don't have your handbells at home, that's why I kind of created this little scenario using different objects. And cutlery was a really easy one because they are all different. Obviously, they don't equate to the weight or anything like that of bells, but the coordination is one thing that is equivalent.
Thanks, Rob. I think that's a great explanation, and it's good to know that we should go back into that to look at the homework that you've given us as well.
Yeah, that's yes. The teacher part.
Rob, I have a question about how did you decide to do weaving as the first of these 3 tutorials?
Well, the whole pandemic and being home thing for us started over March break, and we knew we weren't going back right away. And then once March break was over, it became obvious that it was going to be quite a while. So I actually spent some time, probably like most of the directors in the province, trying to figure out what is there that we can do for our choirs, our players, while we are away? And I did put one thing in place, which is not part of this video, where my handbells could do some rehearsing at home. And at our school, we try and do creative things and come up with different ways of figuring out how to do things. It's one of the benefits of an art school is you try and think creatively all the time. And so seeing 4 different objects, the cutlery is what gave.
So I've lost Rob. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
I couldn't hear you. I can hear you now.
I think we lost the tail end of your sentence, Rob, if you wanted to repeat using
Okay, well, I was talking about how at our school we try and come up with creative ways of doing things, and just seeing, as I was having dinner, 4 different, objects on the table, is like, that's can be like 4 different bells. And so I just did some playing around, and the idea kind of went from there, and then eventually turned into this series of 3 videos, this being the first one.
Lovely. Thank you, Rob. I actually went now to look at your worksheets and the exercises below the video, and I found that there was a printable version, a 2-page
Yep.
PDF. Yeah, that's fantastic. It's got a number of exercises. It looks like a really great resource that we can be using during this time while we're all at home, and especially for those who don't have access to handbells. I think this is a great idea.
Yeah.
Have you
it's
found
right on the web page, and you can also print it off if that's what you would like to do.
Mm-hmm. No, this is fantastic. Thank you very much for preparing this, Rob. Have you tried different techniques to teach weaving with your ringers, whether you're students or through the church? Have you found, is this something, using the place settings, is this something that you sort of iterated on, and you finally came upon this idea of using the place setting, after trial and error, using other things?
No, the place setting idea just kind of jumped out at me. When we're working on weaving with my groups at the church, it is a skill, and the whole key part is being able to get one hand out of the way with the other so that you don't end up reaching over and crossing. And people just kind of naturally do that right away. And by pulling up your hand, you're able to get around those problems. With the kids, with the younger group, we try and turn it into a game. So at first, they learn how to weave and kind of work out their logistics slowly. But then I set up the bells so that there are 3 octaves of bells along the table. And the person starts at the bottom and weaves all the way up the table. And then we go along and we check if all the bells are in the correct place. And it's almost like a little mini Olympics for the kids. And then, of course, they speed up. And then when they get really good, we send them up in thirds. Or eventually we got to the point where we could have the whole group a third apart, making all their way up, which was really a lot of fun. Anything that can be turned into a game, kids love it. And actually, I'm sure that adults would probably like, just doing some of those things, because it makes working on a skill just more enjoyable.
Interesting. So you do this as a group with your choir all weaving together?
Yeah, 3 octaves, just run all the way up. At first, it's just a competition, like a skill thing for the individual kid, and that's seeing if they can put them in the right order. And once we know that they can do that, then there's the joint partnership of being basically kind of shoulder to shoulder, which obviously we wouldn't be doing now, but being shoulder to shoulder, and as soon as you set it down, 1 ring later, somebody else is picking it up. So there is very much that partnership part, which is so much part of our playing as handbell players. You're always working with your neighbor.
Definitely, Rob, a team effort.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have a question from Janice Cowie. And Rob, this one is, are there any special weaving tips that you would suggest when working with small groups? Is it basically the same principle, just doing it faster?
I would say that the principle is basically the same because the technique itself doesn't change. With a small group, yes, you're going to be probably doing quite a bit more. It depends on what your small group is. If it's a quartet, you're obviously working with a lot more bells than you normally are in a large ensemble. So that's going to be an added problematic part to take care of. But the skill itself is basically the same. It's putting the bell back in the right place. That's the whole idea behind weaving, so that it's predictable when you go to pick it up for a second time. We've all run into that problem where we have put our bell down in the wrong place. And that's what leads to musical problems.
Or panicked looks on your ringers' faces.
Yes, we've all seen those, and I'm sure I have done some of those myself.
So, Rob, do you have, if there's one takeaway to effective weaving, what do you think is the most important thing to be able to weave effectively?
Just to practice it. And that was the idea behind this video. Although we don't have our bells, we can practice. Oops, almost had a tragic place setting accident. We can all work on skills still while we're at home. And that's the whole idea behind this series of 3 videos, is these basic skills, which are so fundamental to what we do as handbell musicians, are things that we can practice over and over again, even when we don't have our bells.
Thanks, Rob. We have a question from Elaine, and I'm sure everybody's thinking about the same question, Rob. Can we, and I'm sure it's the choir directors, share these exercises with the choir members that are not an OGEHR?
Absolutely. You're talking about the ones on my webpage?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. On my webpage, any of the stuff that I put there, because I've got some compositions and some arrangements as well, they're all there with a Creative Commons license, meaning anybody can download it, photocopy it, use it, play it. You just can't publish it yourself and make money on it. So yes, anything that's there, feel free to use it and to share it with whomever you like.
Thanks, Rob. Manny?
Actually, Rob, I had a question. Watching your video, I was struck by the beautiful handbell sounds coming from your cutlery. And I was wondering how you managed such a trick.
Okay. In doing composition, I work in a program called Finale, and it uses sample sound libraries. And the one in Finale itself is not a great handbell sound, but you can buy libraries of sound and then import them into the program for composition. So I have bought a handbell sound library, which is Chimeric bells. It actually is the same sounds as the set of handbells which I have at our church. So when I'm doing the sound files for the compositions I'm working on, then I'll use that sound library, and it will sound like a group playing. You don't have as much control over things like dynamics mix and all of that. But you do get a really nice basic handbell sound. So in my composition for this, all it was 4 whole notes separated by a whole measure of rest, all at each of the individual notes. And I exported that as a sound file. And then I chopped it all up so that I had each of those separately. And then when I'm creating the video, I drop those sounds in. And when I dampen, I just have to watch the actual video and stop the sound at the right point. So,
well, that's fantastic, Rob. I was very impressed.
It does have a nice effect.
It was fantastic. I was surprised how good your dinner forks, your salad fork sounded.
It's incredible what they can do.
Amazing, amazing timing. I don't see any other questions. I'll just give us a minute if anybody else wants to type in the chat function.
Maybe I'll take the opportunity then to say I used regular cutlery, but for a degree of difficulty, you could, if you're feeling really confident in your handbell sounds, although I don't recommend anything quite this big.
That good tip, Rob. I think that if you're using that something that large, you might want to be putting that on a separate table and using 2 hands.
Standing. Yeah. But I'm sorry, that's the drama teacher part coming out in me. I do Shakespeare each year, and so I have a number of these kind of props which I've purchased at home.
Of course. Thanks, Rob. Great tip.
So I think we'll probably close off, Manny.
Well, thank you very much to everyone who was able to join us today for our inaugural handbell tutorial. And we hope that you encourage your ogre friends to make sure that they join us next Sunday, September 20th at 7 p.m. for the second video in Rob's series. And that will focus on malleting.
And before we leave, I just extend a special thanks to Rob Cairns for putting this video together, this delightful, focused and funny video, and for also responding to all these questions in the Q&A session. And again, to all of you for attending.